I wanted to say I appreciated that last question. I think it came from Dr. Johnson, and when I was thinking about it, is we are, when it comes to documentation, we are an industry that is unrivaled by others when it comes to the complexity and the amount of documentation. So hopefully we will actually lead the way on doing some of the changes on the documentation, and will provide some of the industry solutions, and hopefully others will learn from us. Patty, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. All right. That was wonderful. So let me do just a really quick summary, and then we can get into some more discussion. I think we have a couple more polling questions too. So our objective for this symposium today was to talk about how we get data into the electronic health record. So we had panelists talk about the various ways it gets in. We type it, we dictate it, we scan it. It comes in the form of videos or images. It comes to us from external parties, like from health information exchanges or from third-party apps and different tools, medical devices. It gets in all kinds of different ways. So we've got also our panelists spoke about usability and the importance. Zach talked about usability, and when I think about usability, I almost think that it's pervasive. I mean, everything, it's the foundation almost for everything that we do. And I think we have to think about going forward. Kim talked about workflows, the importance and how they're key to understanding how we care providers do our work and how we think, and help the technology to support that. Susan talked about structured documentation, free text versus structured. And there's just too many clicks. Pete talked about the concept of documentation, the sharing the practice of documentation. And I really was thinking about what you were saying, Pete. It's a huge culture change, isn't it? And I think about, from my nursing perspective, I wear my nursing hat. I think about the 4 million nurses in the United States that all were taught, if you didn't document it, it wasn't done. So, I think, we need to get over that and move on. So voice recognition, talked about kind of the good and some of the challenges. It's definitely faster, but, there are some things to consider. And Lorraine wrapped us up with copying and pasting. And we know it's a great feature, but we always have to be aware of the potential safety issues that it can cause. So, now, Chris, I know that I saw in the chat at one point you had a question you wanted to ask, and maybe you can ask that, or should we do the polling questions first? Yes. Okay. So, Craig, could you bring up polling question number 5, please? Or yes, 4. Thank you. All right. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, where do you think we are today in terms of ease of documentation, how we get the data in? To the EHR. So 10 being optimal, it's the best possible, no changes, we got it. And then 1, of course, being the worst possible. So let us know where you think today we stand. And we'll do this again in another year and see where it is. Oh, wow. Chris, did you think it was going to be there?
That's where I'm actually surprised that it's as good as this. I would have thought it being a little bit lower, and it is because a lot of us are old and we are used to the benefits of paper, as Judy mentioned early on. In 25 years of taking care of neonates, I have never given up my index cards that describe what's really wrong with my patients, because I have an old brain and I need the reflection, and I've never found a place in my documentation where it's easily accessible and available to me at any point. So I am not surprised at all. What we're seeing here is that the benefits of paper, the ability to scribble out things and change things on the fly and easily identify things, that those benefits are not there in the documentation. So I'm not really that surprised at all, Patty.
I think you're talking about the myth of going paperless, right?
Yeah.
So I want to know, so on that poll, we just saw that there was somebody who chose 8. So, and I think it was only one person because it was 1%. I would love to know who that was, and so that they can share with us what they're doing. Okay, one more poll. Last one. Okay. So, given everything we've talked about, where should we prioritize our attention to improve how we document in the EHR? And so we tried to kind of capture everything. Maybe I should have put an other in there, but I think this captures most of the concepts that we talked about today. So where should we, and again, just like last week, just choose one. I know you probably want to choose 2 or 3, but where should we prioritize? Where should we start to focus our attention to improve how we document in the EHR? Ah, very good. Now these are captured, aren't they? These responses to these polls? Yes, okay, very good. I'm actually a little bit surprised that the usability wasn't higher.
Yeah, so I think this I'm less surprised by that, Patty, because I know how often I get interrupted in my workflow by documentation requirements, and I think I'm not alone there. So you know, it's not just how we're doing it, but you know, when we are doing it, that really just seems to matter a lot.
Yeah, well, it takes me back to, and Kim, you will remember this. So after we went live at Vanderbilt, we did a study where we did observations of how people were handling the implementation of our new electronic health record there. And, you know, we deployed ourselves out to various units that were either in a ambulatory setting and inpatient setting. And, you know, I'm recalling that a lot of the times, or the majority of time, that's frustration that people were having was with the workflow. And, you know, and then they made comments, things like, if somebody had sat with us and understood how we do our work and what we need to do and when we need to do it and the way we think about what needs to be next, this would have been much less challenging for us. So you had a question that you wanted to ask the group earlier, and I'm assuming you want to open it to all of our panelists that were speaking today.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. I'm still struck by the fact that the documentation is so painful and still so frustrating, and that we haven't found any good alternatives. And you know, I'm thinking back at the handheld devices when they first came out, and how excited some of us were, some of us more than others, right, Kevin? About the ability to have computing power in your hand, but with new devices, with liquid paper, with handwriting recognition, I have seen very little in that direction that I have seen. You know, the ability to use the liquid paper, I think it's probably copyright by somebody or trademarked by somebody. But do people see anybody on the panel? Do they see a use for an alternative form of paper that can be digitized right away as something that would be useful for the future? And this can go to anybody on the panel.
I'll just comment that there are actually some tools out there for the iPad and things like that where you can write words and it will turn those using OCR into digital text. So just as you're describing, leveraging the concept of being able to write things down. However, depending on how good or bad your handwriting is, it might not work very well for you. But this is such an easy way for machine learning to understand how you specifically write and turn those things into the right characters. But there just hasn't seemed to be as much energy and effort driven into improving that particular space. But there are a few apps that do it, but if your handwriting's as bad as mine, it won't help you much.
Yeah, I think the EMR, that's one thing it actually did fix is physician handwriting. So.
Yeah. But, you know, if we remember, only less than 1% of terrible handwritten prescriptions ever made it to the patient, right? Because there's always a good pharmacist or a good nurse in between us and our dangerous handwriting.
I think the variability in handwriting it's a big challenge. I've tried using Surface tablets and iPads and iPhones, and the accuracy is just really not there. And actually, let me say the combination of accuracy and speed. That's really I think the issue.
Mhm. Oh, so are there any, thank you so much. Are there any other last minute comments that any of our panelists would like to make? Something that sparked an idea as some of the other panelists were speaking that they would like to share before we wrap things up?
Patty, I put something in the chat. I thought of another industry that with Kendrick's question about other industries, and it's, international aid. It's interesting, in the last decade, they've been moving away from highly regulated regimes when it comes to poverty relief, and they're just giving money to poor people, and they're actually getting better outcomes and less fraud and waste than when they had a really intensive regulatory regime. And I think there's a good lesson for us there. We're looking at issues around the concern about the cost of fraud, but no one's looking at the cost of preventing fraud by pushing, shifting that work and that burden onto the people who should be doing something else, like providing care. And I think thinking carefully about a deregulation in this area and using smart technology and AI to figure out who's cheating and who's not would save all of us a lot of time and trouble, and dramatically improve care and innovation in care.
Yeah, so true.
Thank you.
And I saw Ross Koppel's comment about open notes. I'm sure that concept is going to come up in future sessions. So let me.
I think we have 2 minutes to set the stage for the next talk, Patty, right?
Yes, we do. So if I can get my slides right here. Last one through our, yes. Okay, so next week, same time, same channel, Friday, January 29th, will be the concept of exemplars and key successes. And so we're going to hear, from several other people about how they've done this and had some success with it. I think, sometimes we, talk today a lot about how things don't work. I'm excited to hear next week on some areas that have been successful. So your session leaders next week will be Kenrick, and Karthik Natarajan will be facilitating. And Judy or Trent or Sarah, are there any other things we need to say, any housekeeping items or things to wrap up the session?
Just a quick plug for the next session. It really has some cool buzzwords. There's Project Joy, Track It, and Clickbusters, just to name a few. So just for those buzzwords, I think it's worthwhile tuning in.
Yes, indeed.
And I think a big thank you to Patty and Chris for leading this session. Thank you so much for your work putting into it. It was really an excellent conversation.
And thank you to the panelists.
Big plus one.
All right. Well, thank you, and we'll see you all next week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.